My parents pressured me when I had to prove to my wife that the child was mine and that I had the right to be her guardian. My parents accused me of betraying family values. I'm James, 34, a single dad fighting for custody of my 6-year-old daughter, Molly. I never thought I'd be here, locked in a legal battle against my ex, battling for the most important person in my life. And if that wasn't hard enough, my parents, Elizabeth and John, have a knack for turning even the most straightforward issues into a soap opera. Growing up with them was a challenge. Elizabeth and John weren't nurturing parents. They were controlling, perfectionist ones. If I brought home a B, it wasn't good job, but why not an A? Every decision I made was second-guessed. They didn't see me as their son, but as a project. I learned to live with it, even tolerate it, until Molly came into my life. Then everything changed. The custody battle with Rachel, my ex, has been grueling. She's accused me of everything under the sun, from being inattentive to outright neglectful. It's not true, of course, but fighting baseless accusations still takes a toll. The court date to decide custody was coming up, and I was putting all my energy into being prepared. That's when my parents decided to stir the pot. The week before the hearing, Elizabeth called me, her voice brimming with excitement. We've planned a family vacation. John booked tickets for everyone. St. Lucia, all-inclusive. I hesitated. That sounds great, but I can't. The custody hearing is next week. Elizabeth's tone shifted immediately. You're putting your personal drama over your family? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This isn't drama. It's Molly's future. Well, she snapped. If you cared about family, you'd make time for us. The conversation spiraled from there. John joined in, accusing me of being selfish, of not prioritizing what really mattered. I tried explaining that this wasn't a choice, but they wouldn't hear it. By the end of the call, I was furious. It wasn't about the trip. They'd planned it knowing full well I couldn't go. This was a power play, another attempt to control me. The house felt emptier than usual that weekend with Molly at Rachel's. My parents' behavior was weighing on me. They had always been difficult, but this felt different, calculated, almost cruel. It wasn't just about me anymore. Their manipulations were creeping into Molly's life. Elizabeth called again the next morning, this time with an ultimatum. Are you coming or not? I already told you I can't. Her response was cold. Then don't expect us to support you when Rachel wins. You'll only have yourself to blame. The day of the custody hearing, I was nervous but ready. My lawyer, Sophia, was confident in our case. I had every document, every piece of evidence I needed to prove I was the best parent for Molly. As I sat in the courthouse lobby, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. Check your email. It's urgent. Curious and slightly anxious, I opened the email. What I saw made my stomach drop. Attached were photos of Molly, taken without my knowledge. There were shots of her playing in the park, walking to school, even sitting on the swing in our backyard. The caption read, "Are you sure she's safe with you?" I showed Sophia immediately. Her expression darkened. This is a serious breach of privacy. We need to report this to the judge. The email disrupted the entire hearing. Rachel's lawyer denied any involvement, but the judge wasn't convinced. She postponed the case until the source of the photos could be determined. I couldn't stop thinking about the photos. Who would do something like this? The answer came a few days later during an unannounced visit from my parents. Elizabeth walked into my house, her face flushed. We need to talk. What is it now? I asked, already on edge. She hesitated, then blurted out, the email. It was us. For a moment, I didn't understand. You sent the photos? John, standing behind her, tried to sound reasonable. We hired a private investigator. It was for your case, to show the court how involved you are with Molly. My anger boiled over. You violated our privacy? You endangered Molly to make a point? Elizabeth looked indignant. We didn't endanger her. You're overreacting. You had someone stalking my daughter. I shouted. Get out. They tried to justify their actions, but I wasn't listening anymore. I wanted them gone. I called Sophia that night, worried about the legal implications. Could they use the photos against me? They could try, she said, but it would probably backfire. This kind of behavior doesn't sit well with judges. Even with that reassurance, I couldn't shake the feeling that my parents would keep meddling. Their need for control was boundless, and I wasn't willing to risk Molly's safety to appease them. That was the last straw. I decided I couldn't allow them to be part of our lives anymore. I had barely started to process what my parents had done with the photos when Melanie, my younger sister, decided to join the chaos. Melanie, 27, is the golden child, the one who can do no wrong in my parents' eyes. While I've spent my life trying to live up to impossible standards, Melanie has always been showered with unconditional praise. She's also the master of taking my parents' side, no matter the situation. It started with a phone call. I wasn't in the mood to talk, but when I saw her name pop up on my screen, I sighed and picked up. "James," she began, her tone already accusatory. "What's going on? Mom says you're refusing to go on the family trip." "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered. "Did she tell you why?" "She mentioned something about court," Melanie said dismissively. "But seriously, is that more important than making memories with your family? Molly's going to remember these trips forever." "Melanie, it's a custody hearing. This isn't optional." She sighed dramatically, as if I was the unreasonable one. "You're so focused on yourself, James. It's just one day. Can't you reschedule?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "No, I can't reschedule a court hearing. This is about Molly's future. Family comes first," she snapped. "You're acting like you're the only one who matters. Do you even care about how this is affecting Mom and Dad?" I hung up. Later that day, I found out I'd been removed from the family group chat. Normally, I wouldn't have cared. It's mostly full of Elizabeth posting passive-aggressive memes or updates about what John grilled for dinner. But this time, it stung. I'd been excluded from over 200 messages about the St. Lucia trip. When I asked Melanie about it, she didn't even try to hide her involvement. "I suggested it," she said, her voice unapologetic. "No one wants negativity ruining the trip. If you're not going, you don't need to be in the chat." The group chat wasn't the only place the rumors started spreading. Over the next few days, I started getting cold texts from extended family, cousins, aunts, uncles, all hinting at my supposed selfishness. My cousin Laura even called me out directly. "I heard you're skipping the family vacation for a court date," she said in a text. "That's really disappointing, James. Everyone's upset." I typed back furiously. "Upset about what? That I'm trying to keep custody of my daughter?" Her response was swift. "Molly would want you to be with your family. You're making this all about you." The rumor mill was relentless. Even people I barely spoke to were chiming in. My Uncle Greg, who I hadn't seen in years, called to offer some advice. "You need to learn how to balance priorities," he said, his voice full of condescension. "You're letting this court thing consume you. Your parents deserve better than this." "Greg," I shot back, "you don't know anything about my situation." "I know enough to see you're acting like a spoiled brat," he replied before hanging up. It was like the entire family had been brainwashed. No one cared about the custody battle or what was at stake for Molly. All they cared about was the trip and how my absence was somehow ruining their fun. The tipping point came when Elizabeth sent me a long, scathing email. It was one of those messages where every sentence was designed to wound. "You've always been self-centered," she wrote. "This family has been over backward for you. And this is how you repay us? You're 34 years old, James. It's time to grow up and stop acting like the world revolves around you." She ended with, "We've done our best to support you, but maybe it's time you learned what it feels like to stand on your own." Reading her words, I felt a mix of anger and despair. How could she frame this as me abandoning them when they were the ones sabotaging my efforts to be a good father? The drama reached new heights when my Aunt Carol, one of the few family members I still trusted, called me in a panic. "James," she said, "you need to know something. Melanie's been telling everyone that you're only fighting for custody to spite Rachel." "What?" I said, stunned. "She's saying you don't really care about Molly, that this is all about winning." People are starting to believe her. My blood boiled. I called Melanie immediately, but she didn't pick up. Furious, I drove to her apartment and banged on the door until she opened it. "What the hell are you telling people about me?" I demanded. Melanie rolled her eyes. "I'm just telling the truth. You've always been competitive with Rachel. Everyone knows it. Are you out of your mind? I shouted. This isn't about Rachel. This is about my daughter. She crossed her arms, unbothered. Maybe if you spent more time with the family, people wouldn't think otherwise. By the end of the week, I was completely drained. The hearing had been postponed because of the photos. My family was spreading lies about me, and even the people I thought I could trust were turning against me. One night, as I sat in the kitchen scrolling through my phone, I saw a message from an unknown number. It was a screenshot from the group chat. Melanie had posted something mocking me for not coming on the trip. Well, James made his choice, she'd written. Guess he'd rather spend his time in court than with us. Typical. The responses were even worse. Some people just love drama. He's going to regret this when Molly grows up and sees how petty he was. Maybe he should have just stayed single if he couldn't handle being a dad and a son. I stared at the screen, feeling a mix of rage and sadness. This wasn't just petty gossip. It was a full-blown smear campaign. The next day, I finally snapped. I called Elizabeth and John and told them exactly what I thought. You've done nothing but sabotage me, I said. I'm done playing your games. Stay out of my life. Elizabeth tried to protest, but I hung up before she could finish. I blocked Melanie, left every group chat, and deleted half my contacts. It was painful, but I knew it was the only way to protect Molly and myself from their toxicity. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of relief. I didn't need their approval anymore. I just needed to focus on what really mattered, being there for my daughter. The morning of the court hearing was surreal. After weeks of endless drama with my parents, the betrayal of my sister Melanie, and the rumors swirling through my family, I was exhausted. But none of that mattered now. Today was about Molly, and I was determined to prove that I was the best person to care for her. The support I received from Michael, my closest friend, couldn't have come at a better time. Michael and I had been friends since college, but we drifted apart over the years due to our busy lives. When he found out about the custody battle, he didn't hesitate to reach out. I'm coming, he told me on the phone 2 days before the trial. You don't have to, I said, though I was deeply touched. James, you've been through enough. I'll be there. True to his word, Michael drove over 250 kilometers to support me. He arrived at my house the night before, suitcase in hand, and immediately started helping me go over my case. This Rachel stuff sounds rough, he said as we sifted through paperwork, but you've got this. Just stay calm and focus on Molly. It was exactly what I needed to hear. The courthouse was intimidating, a massive building with stone pillars and cold marble floors that echoed every sound. Michael walked in with me, his hand on my shoulder, and stayed close as we navigated the chaos. Rachel was already there, seated with her lawyer, an overly confident man named Mr. Garner. He smirked when he saw me, as if he'd already won. Rachel looked polished as always, her hair pulled back into a neat bun, her makeup flawless. I could feel her icy gaze on me as I sat down at my table with Sophia, my lawyer. You ready? Sophia asked, her tone professional but kind. As ready as I'll ever be, I replied. The judge, a stern woman with sharp eyes and an air of authority, entered the courtroom. All rise, the bailiff announced, and the trial began. The opening arguments were tense. Mr. Garner wasted no time painting me as an unfit father. He brought up every minor mistake I'd ever made, twisting them into a narrative of irresponsibility. Mr. Taylor has consistently prioritized his own needs over his daughter's, Garner said, his voice dripping with confidence. We have evidence to show that Molly would be better off in the care of her mother. I clenched my fists under the table, anger boiling inside me. But Sophia remained calm. When it was her turn to speak, she systematically dismantled every claim Garner made. James Taylor is not only a loving father, but a responsible and attentive one, she argued. He has provided a stable home for Molly and has gone above and beyond to ensure her well-being. She presented photos of Molly's room, her schoolwork, and even testimonials from her teacher and pediatrician. Each piece of evidence felt like a small victory. The turning point came when Rachel herself took the stand. Garner questioned her first, leading her through a rehearsed series of answers that painted her as the perfect mother. But when Sophia began cross-examining her, the cracks started to show. Miss Carter, Sophia began, You've claimed that Mr. Taylor is an unfit parent. Can you provide specific examples to support this claim? Rachel hesitated, clearly caught off guard. Well, he works a lot, she said finally. Do you mean to suggest that providing for one's child is a sign of unfitness? Sophia asked, her tone sharp. Rachel stammered. No, but he's not always there for her emotionally. Sophia nodded thoughtfully. And yet, Molly's teacher describes him as highly involved in her academic and social development. Would you say that assessment is incorrect? Rachel's face turned red. She muttered something under her breath, but the damage was done. When it was my turn to testify, I felt a wave of nerves. The courtroom was silent as I walked to the stand, every eye on me. Mr. Taylor, Sophia began, why do you believe Molly is better off in your care? I took a deep breath. Because I love her, I said simply, and I'll do whatever it takes to make sure she's happy and safe. I went on to explain my routine with Molly, helping her with homework, taking her to soccer practice, reading her favorite bedtime stories. I talked about how we'd redecorated her room together, painting it her favorite shade of yellow and filling it with the books and toys she loved. Parenting isn't about being perfect, I said. It's about showing up, day after day, no matter how hard things get. And I will always show up for Molly. The final moments of the trial were excruciating. The judge reviewed all the evidence and testimony, her expression unreadable. When she finally spoke, my heart felt like it was going to pound out of my chest. After careful consideration, I have decided to grant Mr. Taylor temporary primary custody of Molly, she said. I barely heard the rest of her statement. Relief and joy washed over me as her words sank in. Molly was coming home. Michael was waiting for me outside the courthouse when it was over. The moment he saw my face, he broke into a grin. You did it, he said, clapping me on the back. I couldn't have done it without you, I replied, meaning every word. That evening, we celebrated with pizza and a movie, just like old times. Molly wasn't back yet. There were still formalities to sort out, but for the first time in months, I felt like everything was going to be okay. The trial had been a success, but I knew the battle wasn't over. Rachel wasn't the type to give up easily, and my parents were still lurking in the background, ready to cause more trouble. But for now, I focused on the victory. Molly was safe, and I was one step closer to building the stable, happy life she deserved. That was all that mattered. The custody victory was supposed to be a turning point, a moment where I could finally breathe and start rebuilding my life with Molly. But my parents, Elizabeth and John, couldn't let it go. They had tried to control every aspect of my life, and now that I was standing firm against them, their campaign against me only escalated. It started with whispers, innocent enough at first. Relatives would call or text me with vague questions like, I heard some things from your mom. Are you doing okay? Or your dad's really worried about you. When I asked them what they meant, the answers were always cryptic. I didn't think much of it until my cousin Laura, one of the few people I still trusted, called to give me the full picture. James, you need to know what's going on, she said. Your parents are telling everyone you're spiraling out of control. What? I asked, stunned. What are they saying? They're telling people you're unstable, that you can't handle being a single parent, she explained. And Melanie's backing them up, saying you're neglecting Molly and barely holding on to your job. The social media posts began shortly after. My parents had always been active on Facebook, using it as their personal soapbox. But now their posts seemed directed at me, even if they never mentioned my name. Elizabeth posted things like, some people forget the meaning of family. Sad to see a child grow up and turn their back on everything they were taught. John chimed in with, hard work and loyalty mean nothing these days. Makes you wonder where you went wrong as a parent. The comments were worse. Distant relatives and family friends, people who barely knew me, would pile on with their own judgments. So sad. You raised him better than this. Or, kids these days have no respect for their parents. I tried ignoring it at first, but the constant stream of posts and comments was impossible to escape. Even coworkers started asking questions, subtly probing to see if there was any truth to the rumors. The real blow came when Melanie decided to get involved. She took things to a level I never could have anticipated. One morning, my manager, Karen, called me into her office. James, we need to talk, she said, her voice unusually serious. I sat down, confused. What's going on? She hesitated before sliding a piece of paper across the desk. It was an email, sent anonymously but obviously from someone who knew me. The email accused me of being unreliable, claiming I had missed deadlines, lied about sick days, and created a hostile work environment. It even hinted that I might have a substance abuse problem, though it provided no evidence. This is obviously baseless, Karen said quickly, but HR requires us to investigate any complaints. I was furious. Who would do this? Karen shrugged apologetically. The email was sent from a throwaway account, but whoever it is, they know a lot about you. Is there anyone you're having issues with? I didn't have to think long. My sister. It has to be Melanie. When I confronted her, she didn't even try to deny it. Work is everything to you, she said smugly. Maybe if you lose it, you'll finally realize what really matters. Are you out of your mind? I shouted. Do you have any idea how much damage you've caused? She just shrugged. Maybe it's time you learned that actions have consequences. I stormed out, my blood boiling. This wasn't just petty sibling rivalry anymore. This was sabotage. My parents' next move was even more calculated. Elizabeth called me one evening, her voice dripping with condescension. James, your father and I have been thinking, she began, and we've decided to rewrite our will. Excuse me? I asked, barely able to contain my anger. We've always planned to leave everything equally between you and Melanie, she continued, but given your recent behavior, we're not sure you deserve it anymore. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You're threatening me with money now? Are you serious? This isn't a threat, she said. It's a consequence. If you're going to turn your back on this family, don't expect us to reward you for it. I hung up. The inheritance, valued at millions of dollars, had always been a point of pride for them. They dangled it over Melanie and me like a carrot, a way to keep us in line. But I wasn't going to play their game anymore. The final straw came when they started throwing elaborate family parties, making a show of excluding me and Molly. Photos flooded social media, Melanie laughing with cousins, Elizabeth posing with grandkids, John carving a massive turkey at Thanksgiving. The captions were always pointed. So blessed to have such a loving, supportive family. At first, I tried not to let it bother me. But when Molly started asking questions, it became harder to ignore. Why aren't we going to Grandma and Grandpa's house anymore? She asked one night, her big blue eyes full of confusion. I knelt down and hugged her tightly. Sometimes people don't understand what's important, I said carefully. But we don't need big parties to be happy. We have each other, and that's all that matters. Despite everything, I refused to let their tactics break me. I focused on my work, proving to HR that the complaints were baseless. Karen eventually cleared my name, and the incident only made me more determined to succeed. I also leaned on Michael more than ever. He became my rock, helping me navigate the constant attacks and reminding me to keep my focus on Molly. You can't control what they do, he said one night over beers, but you can control how you respond. Don't give them the satisfaction of seeing you fall apart. He was right. No matter how hard they tried to tear me down, I wouldn't let them win. Even with the inheritance threats and social media smear campaigns, I knew I had something they could never take away: Molly's love. As long as I had her, I didn't need their approval or their money. They could spread all the rumors they wanted. They could throw their lavish parties and rewrite their wills. None of it mattered. Molly was my priority, and I would protect her from their toxicity at all costs. After everything my parents and Melanie had put me through, the rumors, the sabotage, and the emotional manipulation, I finally realized that I couldn't navigate this battle alone. I needed help, not just with my custody fight, but also with understanding why my family had such a grip on my life. That's when I decided to start therapy. My first therapy session was nerve-wracking. The room was small but comfortable, with soft lighting and walls lined with shelves of books. My therapist, Dr. Lindsay Carter, greeted me with a warm smile. "So, James," she said as we sat down, "what brings you here?" I hesitated, unsure where to begin. Honestly, I don't even know. My life's a mess right now. My parents, my sister, they've been manipulating me for years, and I didn't see it until recently. Dr. Carter nodded. Family dynamics can be complicated. Why don't you start from the beginning? Over the next few sessions, I poured everything out. My childhood, the constant pressure to meet my parents' expectations, their relentless control over my decisions, and the recent custody battle that had brought everything to a head. They've always treated me like I owed them something, I told Dr. Carter. Like I was never good enough unless I was doing exactly what they wanted. Dr. Carter leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. It sounds like you've been caught in a cycle of manipulation for a long time. But recognizing it is the first step to breaking free. Her words hit me hard. I'd spent my entire life trying to please my parents, even at the expense of my own happiness. Now, for the first time, I was beginning to see how toxic their influence had been. As therapy progressed, I started to unpack memories I'd buried for years. I remembered how, as a teenager, my parents would guilt-trip me into giving up my weekends to help with chores or family events, always framing it as family values. I also recalled the times they undermined my confidence. When I got accepted into college, my dad's first comment wasn't "Congratulations, but that's great. But why didn't you aim for something Ivy League?" Dr. Carter helped me see these moments for what they were. Manipulation tactics designed to keep me dependent on them. You've been conditioned to prioritize their approval over your own needs, she explained. But you're not that powerless teenager anymore. You have the strength to set boundaries now. Around this time, something unexpected happened. My estranged Aunt Rebecca, my mother's older sister, reached out to me. I hadn't seen Rebecca in over 15 years. She had a falling out with Elizabeth when I was a teenager, and after that, she'd vanished from the family. Her message came through Facebook. "Hi, James. I've been hearing about everything you're going through from Laura. I know it's been a long time, but I'd like to help if I can. Let me know if you're open to talking." I was hesitant at first. Rebecca had always been a bit of a mystery. My parents described her as difficult and selfish, though I was beginning to suspect those labels had more to do with her refusal to fall in line than anything else. After some thought, I decided to respond. We met for coffee at a quiet cafe downtown. Rebecca looked much the same as I remembered. Sharp features, kind eyes, and an air of confidence that was almost intimidating. "It's good to see you, James," she said, giving me a warm smile. "You look just like your dad when he was your age." "Thanks for reaching out," I said. I wasn't sure if I should respond, but "I'm glad I did." She nodded, her expression turning serious. "Laura told me about what's been going on. I'm not surprised, to be honest. Your parents have always been difficult. That's one way to put it," I said with a bitter laugh. Rebecca leaned forward. "James, I've been where you are. Your mom and dad tried to control me the same way. When I wouldn't let them, they turned the whole family against me." Hearing her say that was like a weight lifting off my chest. For years, I'd thought I was the problem, that I was somehow failing as a son. But Rebecca's words made me realize I wasn't alone. Over the next few weeks, Rebecca became a lifeline. She shared stories about her own experiences with my parents, from their relentless criticism to the manipulative games they played to keep her under their thumb. "They make you feel like you're nothing without them," she said one evening over the phone. "But the truth is, they're the ones who need you. They thrive on control. The moment you take that away, they lose their power." Her advice was practical, too. She helped me craft firm but polite responses to my parents' emails and texts, setting boundaries they couldn't ignore. When they tried to guilt-trip me about the inheritance, Rebecca was the one who reminded me that my worth wasn't tied to their money. Therapy and Rebecca's support started to change me. I found myself standing taller, speaking more confidently, and, most importantly, saying no when I needed to. One day, my mom called to berate me for not attending yet another family event. "James, your father and I are so disappointed. Do you have any idea how selfish you've been lately?" Normally, I would have apologized or tried to explain myself. But this time, I stayed calm. "I'm sorry you feel that way," I said, "but I need to do what's best for me and Molly. If you can't respect that, I don't think we should be talking right now." Elizabeth was stunned into silence. It was the first time I'd ever stood up to her like that, and it felt incredible. Molly also noticed the change in me. "Daddy, you're happier now," she said one night as I tucked her into bed. "I am," I admitted. And it's all because of you. Her smile was all the validation I needed. As I continued to grow, my parents' influence began to fade. The rumors they spread, the parties they threw, the inheritance threats, it all seemed less important as I focused on building a healthy, happy life for Molly and me. Rebecca remained a constant presence, offering guidance and support whenever I needed it. She even started visiting regularly, becoming the positive family influence I'd been missing for so long. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my life, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. The day of the final custody hearing felt like the culmination of everything I had fought for. I'd spent months battling accusations, manipulations, and betrayals from the people who were supposed to support me. But this day wasn't about them. It was about Molly. It was about proving to the court, to myself, and to her that I was the father she deserved. The courtroom was buzzing with quiet tension when I walked in. My lawyer, Sophia, greeted me with a reassuring nod. Rachel was already seated at her table, her lawyer, Mr. Garner, beside her, shuffling through papers. Her polished appearance was as intimidating as ever, but this time I didn't let it shake me. Michael, my best friend, had made the trip again to support me. He sat in the gallery, giving me a thumbs up as I took my seat. Rebecca was there too, a quiet but steady presence. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. The hearing began with the usual formalities, but I could feel the weight of every word as arguments were presented. Rachel's team focused on portraying me as an overworked, distracted father. Garner emphasized every minor mistake I'd made in the past year, from missing a parent-teacher conference to a single late pickup at school. Sophia, as always, was prepared. She countered with glowing reports from Molly's teachers, doctors, and even her soccer coach. Mr. Taylor has consistently shown dedication to his daughter's well-being, she said firmly. He has provided her with stability, love, and support during a tumultuous time. Then came the bombshell. Sophia introduced evidence of Rachel's neglect, late school pickups, forgotten lunches, and even a disturbing incident where Molly had been left unattended at a park for over an hour. Rachel squirmed in her seat as the judge listened intently. The moment of truth came when I took the stand. Mr. Taylor, Sophia began, why do you believe you should have full custody of Molly? I took a deep breath. Because she deserves a stable, loving home. I've made mistakes, but I've learned from them. Every decision I make is with Molly's best interest in mind. I want her to grow up knowing she's safe, supported, and loved. Sophia nodded. What are your plans for Molly if the court grants you full custody? I want to give her a life full of joy and security, I said. I want to build traditions with her, surround her with positive influences, and help her grow into the amazing person I know she's meant to be. The judge's decision was announced after a brief recess. After reviewing the evidence and testimony, I am granting Mr. Taylor full custody of Molly Taylor, she declared. Ms. Carter's visitation rights will be supervised and limited to twice a month, pending further review. Relief washed over me like a tidal wave. I felt tears welling up as I realized the fight was finally over. Molly was mine to protect, nurture, and raise without interference. The victory wasn't just in the courtroom. It extended to my family as well. I'd already begun setting boundaries with my parents, but after the hearing, I decided it was time to formalize them. I sent Elizabeth and John an email outlining clear rules. No surprise visits, no unsupervised time with Molly, and no more attempts to manipulate or interfere with my life. Elizabeth's response was predictably dramatic. This is outrageous, she wrote. We're your parents, James. You can't cut us out like this. But I didn't waver. For the first time in my life, I put my foot down. These boundaries are non-negotiable, I replied. If you can't respect them, you won't be part of our lives. Melanie, on the other hand, was another story entirely. After her blatant attempts to sabotage my job, I had no choice but to seek legal protection. My lawyer helped me obtain a restraining order, which prohibited her from contacting me or interfering with my work. When she found out, she called me in a rage. This is ridiculous, she screamed. You're ruining our family. No, Melanie, I said calmly. You did that yourself. Stay out of my life. With the legal battles behind me, I turned my attention to building a new life for Molly and me. I started small, creating little traditions just for the two of us. Every Friday night became pizza and movie night. Molly would pick the movie, and we'd make homemade pizzas together, laughing as we experimented with crazy toppings. On Saturdays, we explored the local park, feeding the ducks and racing each other on the trails. Holidays were reimagined too. Instead of big, stressful gatherings with extended family, I invited close friends like Michael and Rebecca to join us for cozy celebrations at home. One of the most meaningful traditions we created was memory jars. Every week, Molly and I would write down our favorite moments on little slips of paper and add them to a jar. At the end of the year, we'd sit down and read them together, reliving the joy of those moments. Rebecca became a frequent visitor, bringing her warmth and wisdom into our lives. She even helped me decorate Molly's room with fairy lights and a mural of her favorite characters. Michael continued to be a rock, always ready with advice, humor, and a listening ear. Life after the custody battle felt like stepping into the sunlight after years in the shadows. For the first time, I wasn't waking up in a state of stress or dread. Instead, my days were filled with laughter, growth, and a sense of peace I'd almost forgotten was possible. Molly and I had a chance to finally breathe, and we took it with open arms. Molly thrived in our new routine. The structure and stability she'd been missing for so long allowed her to blossom. She became more outgoing at school, eagerly talking about her day when I picked her up. Her teachers sent home glowing reports, commenting on her creativity and kindness toward her classmates. One day, Molly came home with a flyer clutched in her hand. "Daddy, I want to do this," she said, her eyes wide with excitement. It was an advertisement for ballet classes at a local studio. At first, I hesitated. Ballet lessons weren't cheap, and between rebuilding our lives and managing expenses, money was tight. But seeing the joy and determination in her eyes, I couldn't say no. I enrolled her in the beginner class and adjusted the budget to make it work. Molly's first day of ballet was a revelation. She loved every second of it, from learning the basic positions to twirling around with her new friends. Over the weeks, she grew more confident, practicing her moves in the living room and giggling when I attempted to join in. When her instructor announced a recital, Molly was over the moon. She worked tirelessly to perfect her routine, her little face set with determination as she practiced her plies and pirouettes. The day of the performance, I sat in the audience, nerves jangling as if I were the one about to go on stage. Rebecca and Michael were there too, cheering Molly on as she stepped into the spotlight. She was radiant. Her movements weren't perfect, but her enthusiasm and joy shone through. When she received an award for Best Performance by a Newcomer, she beamed with pride. Watching her clutch the small trophy, my chest swelled with emotion. This was what I had fought for. Moments like these. Things were improving for me, too. My focus at work had returned, and my efforts hadn't gone unnoticed. My boss, Karen, called me into her office one afternoon. "James, you've been doing exceptional work," she said, sliding an envelope across her desk. I opened it and stared at the letter inside. It was a promotion, complete with a 40% salary increase. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "This means so much to me." Karen smiled. "You've earned it. Keep it up." The promotion was more than just a financial boost. It was a validation of everything I'd been through. I had come out of the storm stronger, more focused, and ready to move forward. During this time, I began sharing my story on Reddit. At first, it was a way to process everything I'd been through, but it quickly became something more. The support I received from strangers around the world was overwhelming. "Stay strong, James," one commenter wrote. "You're doing an amazing job as a father." Another said, "Reading your story gives me hope. Thank you for sharing." As my posts gained traction, I connected with others who were going through similar struggles. We shared advice, offered encouragement, and reminded each other that we weren't alone. One message stood out to me. A fellow single parent wrote, "You've inspired me to fight for my kids. Thank you for showing me it's possible." That comment stuck with me. If my journey could help even one person find the strength to keep going, it was worth sharing. With stability at home and success at work, I decided it was time for Molly and me to take our first vacation together. I reached out to Michael and Rebecca, and we planned a trip to the mountains about 500 kilometers away. The preparation was half the fun. Molly helped me pick out supplies, chattering excitedly about hiking trails and campfires. Rebecca booked a cozy cabin for us, complete with a fireplace and a view of the surrounding peaks. On the day of the trip, we packed the car with snacks, games, and Molly's favorite stuffed animal, Mr. Fluffy. As we drove through winding roads surrounded by lush greenery, Molly's excitement was contagious. "Daddy, look at the mountains," she exclaimed, pointing out the window. "They're beautiful," I agreed, smiling at her enthusiasm. The trip was everything I'd hoped for and more. We spent our days exploring the trails, Molly's laughter echoing through the trees as she raced ahead. Rebecca taught her how to skip rocks in a crystal-clear stream, while Michael showed her how to roast the perfect marshmallow over the campfire. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, we sat around the fire sharing stories. Molly curled up next to me, her head resting on my shoulder. "Daddy, this is the best day ever," she said softly. "It's the first of many," I promised her. As we packed up to leave the cabin, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. Life hadn't been easy, but it was better now. I had fought for my daughter, and in doing so, I had found myself.